Hello and welcome to QuickBooks Complete 21. Okay, so this is chapter 1, which is going to be the introduction to QuickBooks. So before we begin, this is the book that we are looking into, which is going to be QuickBooks 21 Complete version, written by Douglas Slater. Okay, so this will be the in-class project, which we will be taking a look at is a sample file of a company called Imagine Photography. Okay, so this book shows us how to use QuickBooks Pro, Premiere, and Accountant version of the software. Okay, so primarily Premiere does most of the chapters that we will take a look in the couple sections later on, but through this complete book, it is primarily for Premiere users only. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the QuickBooks product lines. So here we have two different versions, okay? We have the online version and then we have the desktop version, okay? So the desktop version is going to consist of Premiere, Pro, Accountant, and Enterprise. And then of course we have the online version. Now with these ones, these are the top 5 current widely used services that the programs that QuickBooks actually offers in their product lines. Now, of course, if you go on to the Intuit.com or just QuickBooks.com in general, you will see that they actually sell other sections or other different types of programs that are available, such as self-employed, and of course, QuickBooks bookkeeping, okay, online advanced, as well as commerce, payroll, and payments programs, okay? Now, those are going to be considered like when you do go on the website, you do go through an interview process with an actual sales representative, and what they do is they take upon the information that you give them and they formulate which program would be best for you. But for most cases, the original ones that you normally would see would be Pro, Premiere, and Enterprise as desktop versions, okay? Now, of course, with that being said, there's a huge difference in between the differences between the desktop versions. And a little piece of information you should know is that Premiere and Enterprise are used for the 6 industry-specific businesses, okay? And those 6 specific industries are up here in green, right? We have the general type of a business. We have general contractors. We have manufacturers, nonprofit organizations, as well as professional services, and last but not least, retail. Now, of course, when we are using the QuickBooks, we are gearing towards a retail sort of idea where we do provide a product and service. So that's what this book directly or kind of gears us towards, is a retail type of business. However, there are 6 different industries that the Enterprise and the Premiere versions have the capabilities of going beyond those aspects, okay? And those are the 6 different industries that you can have a business, and QuickBooks can be able to do the transactions for those types of businesses. Okay. So once again, we're going to talk about the difference between a desktop version and an online version. Desktop version is pretty straightforward. It's where it's an actual legitimate program that is on a local computer or hard drive, okay? So usually any home desk place or an office typically would have a downloadable program that is on the actual computer itself, right? So in this case, you are most likely not going to be moving anywhere or can be traveling anywhere to be able to have access to the file. It has to be on one specific home or office computer, okay? where the online version is going to be a cloud-based type of program that uses the cloud space. So Intuit has their own cloud space available, and you buy into a package that allows you to have access anywhere in your QuickBooks, your company file at any given time and place, as long as you have internet service. So again, oftentimes if you've seen those commercials about QuickBooks apps that you can download for you to do mobile tracking, that's exactly what the online version is. It allows you to log in whether you have a phone or whether you have a laptop and you're on the go. So in this case, this is going to be more or less online, where you don't have to save everything on the hard drive. It's automatically saved up in a cloud-based service. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about online first, okay? So there are different packages that are available for the online services. We have the first one, which is Simple Start. We have the Essential package, then we have the Plus, and then we have the Advanced packages. Now, each one, of course, is going to have it's going to be a subscription type of base, so you do have to pay either every month, so monthly subscriptions, or you can actually pay up for a full year of subscription. So again, because you are using Intuit's cloud base to store your information up in the cloud, that is why it's a subscription based kind of plan. It's not like a one-time fee payment and you have the program for life. No, this is where you're going to have to constantly be upgrading and renewing your subscription either every month, or you could do a yearly plan. Okay, now of course each one has its own benefits and limitations on what tasks that each one is able to do. So of course, when you're starting out for a small business, right, the main priority of having QuickBooks is to just keep track of your expenses and your income. Pretty straightforward, right? Very simple type of accounting, right? And as you move up in packages, right, so the more you need space, or more you need more tasks to do, or more functions to do to help you manage your books, right, is going to be a higher subscription. Okay, it also deals with cloud space as well. So if you're a bigger or a medium-sized kind of company, you want to look for a plan that's able to fit the transactions that you need within the cloud space. Okay, but again, each one has an addition to what other extra features that a previous subscription would have. So as you can see, for the difference between the starter versus the essentials, is that you have an additional way to being able to have billing features. Okay, and then of course with the Plus one, you're able to manage projects as well as contracts with inventory and stuff. And of course your Advanced is going to be the maximum of the functionalities of managing your business, whether it's keeping income and expenses, but with other things as such as creating reports and information like that. Okay. Now, of course, this book is not going to be focusing on the online version. Okay, it is primarily going to be working with the desktop version. Okay, because with the desktop version, right, you actually have a lot more different functionalities, and it goes beyond than what you can do on an online service base. Because again, when you're traveling from place to place, right? And the idea of that is just to make it more flexible and easier for you to update your and to track your income and expenses on the go. But for a real business that has multiple layers and multiple positions, right, the best bet is to go for a desktop version, because the desktop version is going to go beyond the aspects of just income and expenses. This goes with payroll. This goes with inventory management, sales, and so on and so forth, right? It goes beyond the realm of just what you can do on the go. Okay, so again, here we have 3 different versions. We got the Pro, the Premier, and the Enterprise. These are once again the 3 top basic desktop versions that are available and that most companies actually use widely. Okay. Now, of course, I'm going to go ahead and talk a brief description, just a little bit about the differences between each one. Okay. Now, for Pro is definitely for more smaller businesses. Okay. And then of course, for smaller businesses that are starting up their company and their main key portion is to just be able to do the very basics of keeping track of a good record of their income and their expenses. Okay, so in this case, right, it's for smaller businesses that don't need to have too much in regards to functionalities. Okay, they don't need to deal with things that, for example, like industry specific reports, right? Because for a small kind of business, right, you can also use this for your personal income expenses for Pro. And the difference here is that it holds up to 14,500 items in each list. Okay, and we'll talk about lists later on in the chapter. Okay, but this means that when we can hold up these as many pieces of information, right, you have up to 14,500 available for Pro. Okay, and that also the Pro feature also allows to have 1 to 3 users be able to use the file at one time. So again, we're talking about accessibility amongst multiple users on one single file. Okay. Of course, if you upgrade to the Premier version, okay, this is for small to medium-sized types of businesses who tend to have more, people on their list, so more customers, more vendors that they involved with, or even more employees that they involved with. So this one can hold up to 1,000,000 different items on each list, okay? So again, for a lot more bigger scale for these transactions, for a little more flexibility in larger and more uses of entering a transaction. Okay, and this one also gives the capability to allow 3 to 5 users to be able to have access to the company file at one time. So again, for a small business, right, when we talk about users, we're talking about positions in the company, right? Your number one user for QuickBooks is going to be the admin or the accountant itself. But if you are hiring other individuals for other positions, such as a sales representative, right? Or someone who's in charge of payroll, HR, okay? Or for someone who is just in charge of accounts receivable / accounts payable, so AP and AR, right? If they need to have access to these types of files without having to share one computer, then that's the idea of having multiple users be able to access the file at one time. All right. And of course, this has, again, over 150 plus industry specific reports. So as I mentioned, those 6 different industries, right? If I am a manufacturing type of company, right? With Premiere, you can build up to more than 150 different industry specific. So anything that's in regards to just particularly a manufacturing type of company. That's what those reports can skew. And when you have those specifically tailored reports, you're going to get the maximum amount of information from a report. Okay. This also has forecasting features. So if you're doing projections or predictions for future costs, that's what forecasting allows you to do. And this also allows you to also have the capabilities to do mobile tracking, where you can take pictures with your phone and be able to upload the transactions to your QuickBooks pretty fairly easily. Okay. And of course, if you upgrade to the last software here, which is going to be Enterprise. Enterprise are for the larger type of companies who are like, for example, corporations, okay? LLCs. For corporations or businesses that have billions and billions of people that are involved in the company. So therefore can hold up to more than 1 million items per list. So once again, we're talking about corporate status. We're talking about looking at a business on a grander scale who has billions of transactions that happen per day. Okay? And of course, with that, right, if you have a corporation, you're going to have way more positions available for a corporation, right? You'll have a team full of managers. You'll have a team for marketing. You'll have a team for, projections, sales, profits, right? You're going to have a different and much more variety in positions in a corporation. So that means that with this QuickBooks desktop version, it allows up to 30 users to have access to the company file at the same time. Okay, because with a multitude of positions that a company can have, especially under a corporation, right? You can give access to as many users as you need to be able to have be able to conduct their portion in QuickBooks. So then you don't have. So then the one person or one accountant doesn't have to do everything, right? Everyone who's responsible for their position has access to the file at the same given time, okay, and be able to enter it in at the same time, right? And of course, this has over 150 advanced reports. So not just strictly only just to industry specific, but they have more advanced reports, especially because we're looking at corporations. We're looking at numbers at a grander scale. So the detailing and the reports that you create are going to be a lot more advanced, okay? It also has forecasting as well for predictions. And then, of course, it also has the capabilities to do some mobile tracking. Okay. All right. And of course, the last one I'm going to talk to you guys about is going to be the accountant version of QuickBooks. So with this book here, you actually get the premier/accountant version of the QuickBooks. Just because so then, again, because it's teaching you 3 different softwares at the same time, right? The great thing about having the accountant's version as a desktop version is that it allows you to switch between the different programs. So this gives you accessibility to all 3 different types of QuickBooks desktops, right? It has access to Pro, Premier, and Enterprise, okay? So the reason why this one is so feasible between the other 3 programs is because this one is actually meant for the tax accountant, hence the name accountant's version, right? So again, this is more for people who work for the IRS or just our tax accountants in general for a small business, right? This version allows any other businesses who are seeking for accounting advice or seeking for tax accounting itself, is that a company can have either or Pro, Premier, or Enterprise and be able to create an accountant's copy that's able for the accountant to be able to have access to the files without making any changes or any upgrades or downgrades from the program file itself. So if from going to Pro to Premier, right? That's one way you can do that. You can go from a Pro to Premier file. But the thing is with Accountant, it allows you to be able to access either Pro, Premier, and Enterprise. You just have to be able to switch between them, all right? Now with that too, you can also create the transactions as well as if you had the Pro, Premier, or Enterprise version, okay? So that's the great thing about having the accountant's version, especially this book gives you a copy of that. So then you're able to be able to do everything that the Pro can do and also doing everything that the Enterprise can do, as well as anything that it can do for Premier version. Okay, and of course you can also toggle between the different versions of QuickBooks if you need to have access to them. All right, and of course in this case, yes, okay, the book provides a 5-month trial of the Premier Accountant version of the QuickBooks program. Okay. So the next section I'm going to be talking to you is going to be called the release, or in this case, the product information button. Okay, and we call this the F2 function key. Okay, so on the top of your keyboard, you have an F2, like F1 all the way to F8. Those are called function keys. And you're gonna, if you press F2, that's gonna give you everything and every piece of information you need to know about the program that you're using, the release number, and the exact details that are in regards to the current working data file you're in. Okay? So what does that mean? So for example, if you take a look here, you can see that this is when I open up the program, it tells me that I am currently using QuickBooks Desktop Pro 2019. All right, and then you see here release R1P. Now if you take a look here, R1 out of 22 means that I currently am on release number 1 out of 22. So that means what does R1 mean? R refers to the release number. Okay? Now every year QuickBooks comes out with a newer version of QuickBooks, okay? Or in this case, we call them edition, right? There's the 2021 edition, 2020 edition, and so on and so forth. And every edition of QuickBooks that there is, every program will have some kind of issue or some kind of bug that is in the program, because programming is very hard to do itself. You're never going to produce a program or a software that functions 100%, right? You're always going to have some kind of error or some kind of bug or some kind of issue that the program experiences. So there is a little dashboard or a place where avid users of QuickBooks who do use every single function in QuickBooks and realize that this part of the QuickBooks starts glitching, they would inform the Intuit about this issue. And what happens is that the programmers create releases, which is also known as patches. So then when you update your QuickBooks to the latest release, what you're essentially doing is you're downloading an extra pack or an extra patch to fix the issue that is there. So as you can see, if this is R1 out of 22, that means there was 22 issues that this 2019 version of QuickBooks had. And unfortunately in this one, right, it shows me that I have not updated to the latest update to the program, which is fine. It's not like it's mandatory. You can update it at any given time if you're finding issues, if you're able to run the program smoothly, or the functions that you do not affect you, then you're not obligated to have to update to the newest release. But that's just what that means. That's what the release is, and you can find out that by pressing the F2 function key to know exactly which release you are on in regards to updating your QuickBooks software. Okay? Now, of course, with that, okay, I also mentioned things like exactly when exactly which program you are currently in. So this one is QuickBooks Desktop Pro 2019. As you can see, it gives you all the information such as license information, product information, as well as the date that you install the program. Okay. It also gives you information here about the um, exact file that you're currently working in. So right now, there's a current file with 0 names in it because this is a brand new company file and there's nothing in it. So here we'll populate information such as how many lists you have, how many names you have in your list, how big is the file, how many transactions are in there, okay, in the current working data file that you are in. Okay. So now let's go ahead and talk about real briefly a few things that you do need to know about QuickBooks in order to be able to use it. Now, this is going to be a little accounting background, but if you did not know this, QuickBooks is actually yes, it's an accounting program, but it's actually geared towards helping to make it easier to file for taxes. This is a tax-based type of program, right? If you actually look into what Intuit is a company that is also directly linked to TurboTax. They are the creators of TurboTax. So think about how feasible it is to take a QuickBooks program and to be able to enter all the information and make it that much easier to convert it into TurboTax or just convert it in a way to collect all the information you need to create your tax forms either at the end of the year or whenever, okay? So in this case, with that being said, the way that this program is actually built is you actually do not need to have any accounting background because of how easy it is to enter in a transaction, okay? But the main idea here is that if you are planning to work for a business and you don't have the accounting experience, the most basic information you need to do is understand just what the company is trying to do when it is trying to record its income and expenses, especially when you're dealing with a retail store, right? So we're trying to look at how money flows into the company, whether it is by earning the money by making a sale, right? That's increasing your revenues, right? And understanding that you must have had to pay a cost in order for you to sell those items, and how your bills or things such as rent expense affect the outflow of your money. So just understanding the very basics of a business model, of understanding how to have money flow into your company and how you have money flowing out of your company is the basic things that you need to know in regards to being able to use QuickBooks. Okay. However, if you do have the accounting background, that actually allows you to be able to manipulate QuickBooks in a way that the QuickBooks works for you, not the other way around, not that you work for QuickBooks. Okay. So by being able to have this extra accounting background and understanding the basic knowledge of how debits and credits work, you can manipulate QuickBooks, like I've mentioned before, and basically control the program however you'd like to have it record your transactions. Okay. So let's talk about other basic things that you need to know. You need to know that there are a total of 5 account types. Okay. 5 account types, which is your assets, your liabilities, equity, revenues, also known as income, and your expenses, okay? In QuickBooks, right, we understand assets is going to be anything that we have property over or something that we own, okay? Assets. So if it's cash, right, we own the cash in our banking account. The inventory, right, if we purchase the inventory, those items is considered ours, right? We have ownership over it. A liability is going to be everything that you owe to other people, whether it's through a credit card company or whether it's through a loan, okay? Or if you just owe money to your vendors because they allow you to make payments, or they allow you to give you what you want and bill you later, right? That's going to be considered a liability, which is going to be an obligation that you have to pay back, okay? And then equity is going to be in terms of your net worth in the company, okay? Do not confuse the difference between real estate equity and accounting equity. They are two different terms, okay? They have two different meanings, okay? Equity in here just allows you to see what your net worth is in a company, okay? So whether that includes any original investments into the company, right? That includes any profits that you generated, but that also includes any losses you've also generated as well as if you take money away from the company, that decreases the value of your company, okay? Your net worth, all right? And then, of course, your income. In QuickBooks, we refer income is the way that you generate money into the company. In accounting, we use income revenues as interchangeable, but in QuickBooks, they refer revenues as income. So either way that you refer it to, just know that revenues and income are the same thing, okay? Revenues and income is going to be any means that it takes to generate income for the company, okay? And of course, expenses is very straightforward in general. Expenses is going to be anything it takes to spend that you have to spend in order to operate your business, okay? Whether that's dealing directly with inventory, right? That's a cost of goods sold. Or if you're doing operating expenses such as rent expense, right? That's a means that you have to spend money in order to have a building open for you to conduct your business. Okay, that's going to be an example of an expense. Now, we also have to keep in mind the fundamental accounting equation, which is going to be your assets equals your liabilities plus your equity, okay? Other ways you can also see this is your equity equals your assets minus liabilities. But in this way, the accounting equation, this is the true accounting equation. You don't usually use it the other way around. But it is also referred to the same thing as equity equaling your assets minus liabilities. Okay? So it's going to be everything that you own should be equivalent to all the liabilities that you owe plus the net worth of your company. Okay? Next thing that we're going to take a look at is going to be called the chart of accounts. The chart of accounts is going to be the most important thing that you must have in order for you to be able to start recording your transactions in QuickBooks. You need to have a list of every single account to be able to take a transaction and understand where the money is flowing into and where the money is flowing out from, okay? So once again, this is the chart of accounts, which is going to be a list of every single account that you need to use in regards to everything in regards to the company itself. Okay, so accounts can be number one, your checking account, right? Your checking account's going to tell you how much money you have in the bank, all right? And of course, if you buy something, you're going to use your checking account, right, to pay for the things that you buy. If you earned money through a sale, you're going to also use the checking account because you've increased your bank account, okay? So that's very important that you do try to list every single account that you can think of in your that you think that the company needs in order to determine and separate its transactions. But of course, the chart of accounts is going to always be an ongoing list that you can always add and delete from at any given time. So it's not going to be like you have to create every single account on there for the very first when you start creating your company file. It's the very first thing you have to do. No, in this case, it will be a constant list that you're going to always kind of update and keep growing, because again, when we understand later on in the chapter that every single giving accounting period, you're always not going to have the same reoccurring expenses as same thing as for income, right? You're not going to have the same customer come in and buy the same product from you every single time. You can have new customers, you can have old customers that come back, but they buy something new from you. So that's going to be considered a reason why you need to make sure that you have those. And of course, your expenses can vary from a day-to-day basis, right? Maybe this day you need marketing expense, maybe this day you need to pay rent, and then that day you need to pay for insurance, right? You can consider those as fixed expenses, but you're also going to have variable expenses too, that maybe you need to incur it for this month, but next month you don't need to. Okay, so you do need to create these accounts for those reasons. So you have, when you have a transaction and you need to enter it into QuickBooks, you understand where the money's flowing in and where the money's flowing out from. Okay. So when we take a look at the chart of accounts, it is in order by account type. So your assets are always going to go first, your liabilities comes next, your equity comes afterwards, and then you have your income, and then you have your expenses in this exact order. Now in chapter 7, I'm going to show you how you can reorder your chart of accounts, but by default is going to populate in this exact list by account type order. Okay. Now we're going to be actually talking about how we actually enter in our transaction into QuickBooks, okay? Now, this is what QuickBooks does behind the scenes, but this is a way so you're able to understand how a transaction affects a business, right? By looking at where the money is flowing in and where the money is flowing out from, okay? So here's an example here of a sale, right? When we made a sale, right, we generated income, right? We earned income. So therefore, that's going to increase my cash flow, because when you sell a product, what are you receiving in exchange for the product? You receive cash or some kind of form of payment. Okay, so in this case, we have sales, and our other account that it's going to be affected is going to be our cash. Now, in this case, because most cases, right, we also have to charge sales tax. Sales tax is going to be something that's called a liability, because this is a responsibility or an obligation that we agreed for doing business in the state and county that you belong into. They require that you charge and collect sales tax from every product that you sell, okay? And this money is going to go towards to the state and the local agency, right? Because that's your agreement terms of being able to sell a product in store. You are subject to have to pay into sales tax, okay? So this is the money that you normally would collect from your customers, and therefore, because it's your obligation, it's your duty to make these payments to the government, right? You're going to have to keep a separate account saying, well, this is the portion of the money that I owe to the government, because it's not money that you generate, right? It's money that you're collecting for a tax agency, okay? So then in this case, right, when we take a look at the flow of the transaction, let's notice this. Because I made a $25 sale, right, and I charged $2.06 for tax, that means I got a grand total in cash for $27.06. And that is where this number one rule must come into play, that your total debits must equal the total number of credits, okay? Now, how do I know which accounts to debit and which accounts to credit? Is going to be this right here. This is called the accounting model, okay? Or also known as the normal balance of accounts, okay? When we take a look at a transaction, they flow in a certain direction. So this is what helps you gear towards to making your decision on which accounts to debit and which accounts to credit. When we're looking at assets, so anything that we own, so if our bank account is something that we own, right? If we're increasing our cash flows, we are most likely to have to debit our account. If we're spending our cash flows, we are going to refer that as decreasing our account by using a credit. Now, by understanding this accounting model is going to help us tremendously on how we understand how the flow of a transaction works. So if we remember from our previous example here, I increased my cash flow with a debit. But I had to I had to credit my sales and my sales tax account. Okay? Now, of course, I've mentioned sales is a revenue or it's an income, right? And in this case, when we're looking at the total debits must equal my total credits, in this aspect, because I earned my revenue, I sold a product, I increased my income. Okay? And how do you increase your income? By crediting this account. And then the same thing here, right? When I refer to my sales tax is considered an obligation, something that you're responsible to pay into or what you owe. So in this case, it's a liability. And how we increase our liabilities is by using a credit. Now, this is also applied science, right? If there's an action, you must have an equal and opposite reaction. So if I have a debit going on, my equal and opposite is going to be the credit. Okay? So that's how this understanding the flow of transaction and understanding the accounting model is going to help you understand where the flow of money is coming in and where the flow of money is coming out from. Okay? And of course, we're going to talk about the difference between a cash versus an accrual basis type of accounting. Okay? So when we talk about cash basis, we are referring to recognizing income and expenses when cash is readily available. Okay? So here we have a specific condition. We must receive cash in our hands to be able to record that we have generated income. Okay, the money must leave our hands, or we write a check. That is going to be determining when we record our expenses. So in this case, you must have the key factor of having cash. Okay. Where an accrual type of basis does not take the fact of cash into consideration. In this case, an accrual type of basis is going to refer to recording revenues when it has been earned. So an example is when I sell a product, right? Once the inventory leaves the store, that means we can record our income whether or not we received cash or not. Okay? So what do you mean by that? So for example, if I had that exact sales, right? A customer can choose to either pay me now or pay me later. And then, of course, it doesn't matter at the end of the day because I still sold a product. And that's the accrual type of account of understanding is it didn't matter whether the customer paid you or not. It's the fact that you sold the product and it's considered as you earning your income. Okay? So oftentimes that a accrual type of basis, accounts payable actually affects accrual types of basis where the underlying condition for cash basis is only cash affects the cash basis. Okay? Same thing with expenses. Expenses are only recorded when you've either received a bill for services that have been completed. Okay, so for example, if I bought some insurance, right, for the month that I'm currently on, I would have to record it right then because usually insurances are effective immediately. So in this case, right, I paid for something for a service to happen, and they either bill me whether or not I paid or not. So in this case, I will recognize the expense the minute it happens, which is going to be signing up for that day that the insurance plan was effective, whether or not I paid. So if I paid in cash, great, that will benefit me. But I can also have the capabilities of making a payment later, right? When you owe a vendor certain money. So when you get billed, right, usually you have a time period of when you have to pay them back. So in this case, that's exactly the idea here. You would record the expense when the service has been completed, or in this case, we've referred that as incurred, the day, the moment it happened, okay? You don't record it whether you paid or not. It doesn't matter. So in this case, accounts payable, which is where you can owe money, all right, will in fact affect an accrual type of basis because it doesn't matter whether you got paid or not. It matters that you record the transaction when it happens, okay? And here's a little fun fact that you need to know. QuickBooks is going to be automatically defaulted, so default settings, to an accrual type of basis because if you are run on a cash basis, right, you're going to not use a lot of the functions that QuickBooks was meant for. Under accrual basis, right, you will maximize the capabilities of all the functions in QuickBooks, such as recording invoices, right, where you're not going to be receiving money at the time of service. You're going to be receiving or pending for a payment from the customer after you sold the product to them. So again, if you're under a cash basis, you're pretty much only limited to two things: your checking account and any expense account that you are going to be referring to. Okay, and sales, of course, but in this case, you're only going to be using your checking account. Okay, where an accrual type of basis is going to allow you to use the maximum amount of windows and functions that QuickBooks does for you to make it that much easier to keep track of your income and expenses, okay? All right. So then, last but not least, we're going to be talking about the accounting in QuickBooks. So when we talk about the double entry system, right, where our debits must match our credits, right? The double entry system refers to how many accounts or how many places do you place this information in. Okay, so the idea with the double entry is that we have a debit equaling our total credit. In this case, when we enter in our transactions into QuickBooks, we enter them in through invoices, bills, memos, and checks, okay? Straightforward, right? We're only entering in this information that we need to represent that transaction. So if I paid for something, I write a check. If I received a bill and I owe somebody money, I just enter in a bill. Okay? So in this case, most of the things that QuickBooks does is it actually calculates all the debits and credits behind the scenes. Where in this case, right, when we're looking at in this perspective, all we're doing is we're just entering the information one way, and the QuickBooks will calculate the debits and credits behind the scenes, okay? And we'll talk about the what a transaction list report does. It actually shows you the actual flow of your debits and credits and how every transaction that you enter through, whether it's a check, invoice, or bill, actually creates the debit and credit system behind the scenes, okay? All right, so next section is going to be talking about QuickBooks files, okay? There are 3 QuickBooks files that you need to know in this program, okay? Now, in my perspective, this is going to be a lot more easier to understand. There's actually really only one file, okay? The other 2 files are just copies of the file, okay? Now, let me explain. When we talk about the very main core or the first file that we create, right? That's going to be called the working data file, also known as QBW, right? For working data file, okay? This is the file that you are going to be creating, and this is the file that you are going to be constantly using to enter your transactions in, okay? Now, in this case, QuickBooks is pretty structured when it comes to saving your transactions, okay? In this case, you do not need to have to save the file at any given time. QuickBooks will automatically save the file for you automatically, okay? So you don't need to do Control S. You don't need to go to File and Save, because every transaction that you enter in the working data file, it actually has a temporary file that's logged into the online website that keeps your information protected and up to date, and it doesn't lose out on it, okay? So that's going to be considered the working data file, where you're constantly going to be entering in transactions, and that's the one that you're going to be constantly updating, all right? The other 2 files, okay, let's talk about the backup first. A company backup file is going to be a copy of the working data file that you use in case for emergencies where your working data file becomes corrupted or gets lost or it won't open up anymore, okay? So that's what a backup file does. It's just basically a backup copy of your working data file. So whenever you need access to it, you have it available at all times. Now this one's going to be, the file name is going to be QBB, right? B for backup, okay? Now, here's the idea here. When you restore a company backup file, what happens is that you are going to generate a new working data file from your backup file, okay? So the backup is just a copy of it, right? When you open up the backup file, it's creating a new working data file. So that's exactly why when I was referring that there's really only one and the other 2 are just copies of them, it's because the idea is that when you open the backup file, you're just essentially creating a new working data file. That's it, with all the information that you had backed up into that company file. Now again, the purpose of it is because when you're making these copies of these backup files is you are saving your transactions up to a specific point in time, okay? Because for any reason that you're currently working your data file, right? Something happens, there's a power outage and your computer just turns off right away, right? Or for any reason you have an internet outage, or for any reason that you're trying to access the file at the same time as someone else accessing the file, and because it's not opening correctly, it can corrupt the file at any given time. Or if someone accidentally misplaced it and put it into the trash can, right? It happens, right? So for that reason, that's why it's important to create a company backup, so then you secure having data from a specific point of given time, right, that is saved, all right? But the idea here is when you restore it, you're basically creating a new working data file for you to be able to enter your transactions from there, okay? Same thing with a portable file, except the difference between a backup and a portable file is going to be the size of the file, okay? Portable file, okay, hence because it's portable, right, is that it is going to be a compressed version of a copy of the working data file, okay? The file name is going to be QBM. Not quite sure why they use M instead of P, right? But it is a copy of the working data file, but it's compressed to the point where you're able to either email it, put it online, have it downloadable somewhere. It's because when you actually look at the working data file, the more content and the more information, the more items you put in there, the file becomes to get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Now, in this case, when you're trying to email it to somebody, right, sometimes you have that cap limit on how much or how heavy a file you're able to send someone over the internet. So that's why they created the portable file, to make it a compressed version of a copy of the working data file to be able to send it over through the internet. And again, when you do send it over to the internet and the other person is going to be opening it, it creates a new working data file from it. Okay, so at the end of the day, the conclusion is you're constantly creating a working data file. The other two are just copies of them, but when you open them up, they become working data files. Okay, so make sure that you do understand that. Now, of course, here's also rules to how data files work. Especially when you're dealing with different programs or different editions, different versions, right? If you are going from a Pro 2019, that means a newer version is able to access the old file and update it to the newer program, okay? Right? Yes, you can do that. However, you cannot go from the newer version, a 2021, and convert it into a 2019, okay? Because 2021 has updated the file to add its new features in there, and these features don't exist in the 2019, so it cannot go backwards, okay? And here's also another cool thing too. Your working data files can be updated to the newer program up to 3 years, okay? So for example, if you have a 2018, right, working data file, you are able to convert it and be able to access it in a 2021 version, right? Because that's 3 years difference, right? From a 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, that's exactly 3 years. And that means any file that's a 2018, you're able to access it in 2021. Okay, so that also gives businesses a reason to not have to update every single year because of that idea, right? That working data files can exist 3 years from now. Okay. Now, if you have a 2017 or a 2015 version of that file, you are not able to open it in a 2021 because that is way too much information that cannot be easily transferable and cannot be updated because that file is way too old. Okay, there's no features on the 2015 version that is easily translated into a 2021 version. Okay, so that's the idea there, that you do have some features and some issues that can arise from that. Okay. All right, so next section here is going to be talking about how to open these files in QuickBooks, right? Straightforward. When you do open up the program, the first thing you should see is a big gray screen, and then in the middle of the gray screen, you're going to be having this pop-up window that allows you to choose options on what you can do. You can either choose one, to create a new company file, which I will show you in chapter 12. Okay, when we get to the chapter where we set up and create our company file. Or we have the option to open an existing data file. Okay, so that option is right in the middle. Okay, so if I go ahead and select that, it's going to give me 3 options that I want to choose from. Okay, it's going to give me the option to choose from a current working data file, a backup file, or to restore a portable file. Okay, so again, those are the 3 different files that you're able to open, right? Now, of course, with those ones, right, depending on which one you choose, right, if I open up my backup file, right, it's going to ask me to create a working data file and save it somewhere, right? So if you choose that, that's that option. Now, of course, in order to open a data file, how do I even create one in the first place? Okay, so same standard things, right? If you're creating a copy of a working data file, you simply go to File, and in this case, you have Backup Company File. And what you're going to do is you're going to choose to create a local backup. Okay, this one's straightforward, right? It's like saving a file, a copy of the file somewhere on your computer or somewhere on your flash drive, right? That's the point of this, right? You're using the file menu to essentially save a copy of the file, okay? And of course, we talked about the second option, which is going to be the portable file, right? If you select the portable file, once again, it's going to ask you where do you want to save the new working data file once you open it. And of course, we'll talk about how to do that throughout the rest of the chapters, okay? And of course, here we have how to even create a portable file. This one's kind of straightforward. You go to File once again, but instead of make a copy of the file, you actually are going to send a file. Now notice this, you have 2 options. You can either create the accountant's version or you can create a portable file. Whichever means necessary you need, whether you are making the accountant's copy or you're making a portable file, right? You're essentially compressing the file into a, easy transferable size for the person, whether it's the accountant or a coworker, if you're emailing it, for them to have access to the files, okay? Now let's talk about how you use and navigate QuickBooks, okay, through the user interfaces, okay? So once you open up your company file, this is going to come standard, right? You have the window looking just exactly like this, okay? Now, first thing I'm going to talk to you about is going to be the main page, which is called the home page. As you can see, it is a graphic depiction of how a transaction works, okay? You're going to see a flow of transaction, okay? For example, when we take a look at the sales section of a file, right? We're taking a look at creating an invoice, and then we're looking at receiving an invoice, or I'm sorry, receiving payments. And then, of course, if we go follow through this line out, you're going to be recording deposits, okay? So this is where, if you don't have the accounting background, this is where you are able to just be able to understand the flow of a transaction by just following these gray lines, okay? Okay? So again, this is called the home page, which is the graphic depiction of a flow of transactions. Now, as you can see, it's broken down into 5 different sections. We got vendor section, which is dealing with anything that has to do with bills, inventory. You have your customer section, which deals with sales or creating invoices and receiving payments. And then you have your employees section, which deals with entering time, making payments to your employees, paying your payroll liabilities, and so on and so forth. And of course, you have your company section, which allows you to create your chart of accounts, allows you to create items and services, and so on and so forth. And of course, you have the last section, which is your banking section, which allows you to have access to your check register, your write checks window, and even entering credit card transactions, as well as making deposits to your bank account. Okay, so again, each section is going to be some kind of aspect of a business transaction. Okay. Then we are going to talk about this section right here, where this is going to be called the icon bar. It's normally going to be a list on the left side panel of your screen. That's the default settings for that. But when we understand it like this, right, what does the icon bar serve, or what's the purpose of having it, okay? It is literally a list of shortcuts, okay, to be able to enter in a transaction, okay? Now, here's one thing that you have to also understand too, is that this is not where you can enter your transactions, okay? You can't be attaching an enter bills transaction window onto your icon bar. These are shortcuts to be able to take you to centers that are able for you to be able to enter those extra transactions in, okay? So these shortcuts basically take you to a center, or it takes you to a specific area, so then from there you're able to enter your transactions. You cannot enter transactions directly on the icon bar, okay? And we'll talk about in a few minutes here what a center is and what does it do, okay? So again, this is a shortcut to those centers and those places for you to be able to go from there to be able to enter your transactions, okay? And that's the icon bar, usually is by default left aligned. And we can also be able to display the icon bar anywhere, actually, in this case, where we can make it at the top of the window, or we can make changes to them. And I'll talk more about that in Chapter 7 when we actually learn how to customize your QuickBooks. Okay. Last section of point of navigation is going to be the menu bar, okay? The menu bar, okay, so at the top of the program, right, you have a bunch of tabs or a bunch of lists that you can select, okay? So again, not the blue part. The blue part's going to be your title, your title bar, which allows you to tell you which file you're currently working in, okay, and so on and so forth. While the gray part, where it has file, edit, view, okay, that's going to be referred to as your menu bar. And when you select those tabs, right, it will give you a drop-down list of every single transaction that you can do in QuickBooks, whether it's a transaction, whether it's a quick link to a center, okay, it has a list of every single one there, okay? And that's called the menu bar, okay? Now we're going to talk about what centers are. As I've mentioned before, centers are basically another means for you to be able to enter your transaction through those centers. Now, the more common centers that you would normally see that are widely more used is going to be the vendor center, the customer center, and the employee center, okay? Now, of course, those aren't the only centers that exist in QuickBooks, of course. We also have things like bank feeds, report centers, and also inventory centers, okay? But these number 3 ones are going to be the people that are involved with your company, okay? So your vendors are going to be people that you pay people for services or you buy products from. So your supplier, right? So that's where you're able to do those transactions with your customers, right? Those are people that you sell a product to. And of course, the people that work for you are your employees. Now, each center is going to have a window like this where it gives you kind of an overview of the people who are in your list. So example, this is the vendor center here. On the left side, you see a list of all the people in alphabetical order with their account balances right there in the next column. And then when you click on that individual person, on the top right, you have a little overview of their contact information. And of course, down below, the bottom right is going to be a list of all the transactions that you deal with this individual person. Now, of course, at the top of the window, you can see that there's your vendors list, your transaction list, and of course, you can be able to enter in a new transaction and so on and so forth. So I will talk more into how to use the centers later on in chapters, chapters 4 where we talk about vendors, chapter 2 when we talk about customers, and so on and so forth, right? Every single chapter that we go through in the book is going to be having some kind of information that are in regards to a particular group of people, okay? All right, now let's talk about how we enter transactions into QuickBooks, okay? So the easiest way and the most common way is going to be forms, okay? Now, when I pull up this window right here for my purchase order, it is straightforward, right? You have bubbles and boxes to enter in your information. Just like when you go to a doctor's office, right? They give you out a form that you have to fill out, and it's a bunch of blank lines or boxes too, and you have to fill it in one box at a time. So this is the same idea. To make it that much more easier for you to enter in your transactions is you just need to fill out the boxed empty boxes and to create your transaction. So purchase order, as you can see, very top, you're going to be entering who you're making a purchase from, the class, we'll talk about class later, the date that you're going to be making the purchase for, the item that you're purchasing, the quantity, and what the price point and what the cost of it is going to be, okay? So again, this is going to be the easiest way to enter in your transactions by simply filling out a form, okay? Second one's going to be considered lists, okay? So yes, when you do enter in your transactions, you can enter them in a form of a list, okay? So here's an example of a list right here where it's a list of all of your vendors, okay? So in this case, I can be entering a whole bunch of information simultaneously in a list form, okay? I'm just making a list of details of information about that person, okay? And that's that idea here, okay? You're also able to enter in a transaction by using a register. Now, we'll talk about the difference between which accounts have registers because not all accounts have registers. Only a specific few do. So right here, this is an example of the check register or checking register where we have the date here. You're going to refer what check number you wrote. Who did you write the check out to? What was the account that was affecting this? And was this transaction something that you spent money for? or was it something that increased your check flow? So again, you have your credit column first and then your debit column. And then here at the very, very last column here, you have your balance information. Okay? So again, you can enter in a transaction directly into the register instead of having to fill out a form or having to enter it in as a list. You can enter it directly into your register and get all the information that you need to know about that account instantly, right? Such as when I do this transaction, if I paid for something, right, I spent money, how much do I have money left over in my checking account? You'd be able to find that information instantly, okay? And I'm going to show you how to use the register again in chapter 4, okay? Other ways that you can also be able to enter in a transaction is that by using items, okay? So items are going to be special because these are going to outline the sales process, okay? So that means this can populate either on a sales form, an invoice, a bill, or on a check, right? When you make purchases of inventory, right? That's going to be in regards to the sales process because you're going to sell that inventory. So anything that has to do with sales or just purchasing inventory itself, right? You are able to enter that in through the forms to be able to enter in your transactions, okay? All right, so here's an example here, and we're going to go ahead and take a look again in chapter 2 and as well as chapter 4 when we take a look at entering a transaction for the first time. Okay. Last section here is going to be QuickBooks Help. QuickBooks Help, okay? So in this section right here, for any reason that you are having issues with the program or something is going on with your program, you can always refer to the QuickBooks Help menu. Okay, now as you can see, there are a lot of options that you can choose. You can actually look up for some help in the frequently asked questions area. You can also even ask an accountant. If you ask an accountant, that is a paid service that you do have to pay into it for if you're seeking professional help. But if it's a program or some technical issue going on with the program, you do want to just go ahead and click on QuickBooks Help or get a professional desktop helper to help you out, okay? But this section is also where you can even update and upgrade your software, okay? So update, so if you find an issue or a problem or a bug that is in your program, most cases, right, if you update your QuickBooks to the latest release, that could resolve the issue that you're having. But if you want to as well, you can also, if you don't have enough space or your transactions are just becoming too much, you can also consider into upgrading your QuickBooks to another software or a later software or a different edition. So again, we talked about Pro, Premier, Enterprise versions, okay? Right? Or if you're using a 2019 version and it's already 2021, right? And you want to consider to just switch over to 2021, you can do so by upgrading. Okay? So again, here are the list of options that you can utilize if you have help with either issues with the program itself or having issues in regards to professional accounting help. Okay? So let's go over the review questions here. Okay, so number 1, okay, this is multiple choice review questions, okay. The functional accounting equation, the fundamental accounting equation that governs all accounting is, okay, so here are your options here. And in this case, right, we talked about this, right? It's going to be everything that you own is going to be equal to everything that you owe plus the net worth of your company. So assets will equal to liabilities plus equity. Okay? Number 2, which of the following statements is true? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look here. Debits are bad because they reduce income. In this case, if you're using your accounting model, you're going to find out that debits are not always bad, right? Because they can increase another account. So in this case, this is more of an opinion, okay? Because debits are not all bad, right? They're good for assets because they mean that they increase your cash flow. And of course, yes, it's true, it does decrease your income, but that doesn't mean debits are bad, okay? Equity is increased by a net loss. In this case, right, equity is the net worth of your company, right? How is that going to be considered an increase if you took a loss, right? So in this case, that is definitely not true. You would definitely incur a decrease in equity if you have a loss, okay? How about your debits equal to credits? That statement must hold true at all times. And last but not least, assets are increased with a credit entry, right? And we just talked about this, right? Assets are, they normally increase or they increase with the debit. So in this case, letter C is correct. Okay. Number 3, okay, under the accrual accounting, okay? So in this case, this is where we mentioned that a sale is recognized when, right, the conclusion is when the sale has happened, okay? And expenses are going to be recorded when you finish or complete or receive a bill. So in this case, right, the answer here is going to be B. Incomes and expenses are recognized when a transaction occurs. So it doesn't matter whether you receive cash or not, right? You have the possibility of having your customers owe you the money, so you don't need to be paid in order to recognize that you sold something. Nor do you have to pay your vendors even if they completed a job for you, right? You have the ability of them to bill you and have them get paid later, okay? Number 4, QuickBooks is, okay, let's take a look here, a job costing system. We will take a look at what this means when it comes to a job costing because we do see it in chapter 2 and chapter 9, okay? So yes, it is a job costing system. Number 2, a payroll system. Yes, it is, and we'll dive into that in chapter 10 and 11 where we talk about what you do when you have employees. Well, you need to pay them, okay? And then a double entry system. In this case, yes, QuickBooks is because when we talked about the idea of having your debits equal your credits, right? That's the idea of what a double entry system does. If you're going to put debits in one account, you need to have an equal and opposite credit in another account. So that's going to be hence the word double entry system. And therefore, D, all the above, is going to be the correct answer. Right? Number 5, which is not a method of accessing the data entry screen. Excuse me. So of course with this, right, we talked about the way you navigate transactions into QuickBooks, right? And the 3 different ways is the home page, the icon bar, and the menu bar. Okay? I've never mentioned at all what a data entry button is. So in this case, the answer to not a way is going to be the data entry button. All right? Never mentioned this at all. So we're going to do a little bit of fill in the blank over here. Okay? As you enter data in familiar looking blanks, okay, QuickBooks handles the blank entries for you, okay? So in this case, right, we're going to be entering our data into familiar looking forms, right? And of course, because when we enter in our forms, QuickBooks is going to automatically handle the accounting entries for you behind the scenes, right? It's going to convert your form information and convert it into a debit and credit, and it's going to do the accounting behind the scenes for you. Okay. Number 2, okay, you should blank your data file regularly because it is one of the most important safeguards you can do to ensure the safety of your data. Okay? So in this case, right, you should back up your data file. For any reason that you come across one of the days where you're currently working on your data file, and if something happens to that data file and you can no longer open it, it's been corrupted, etc., it is best bet to have a saved backup copy somewhere in your files, so then if you can never access that working data file for any reason, you didn't lose all your information. Okay? And again, backups are usually saved up on a given point in time. Now, yes, you can do backups every day. You could do backups 4 times a day. You can do backups as many times as you feel necessary, okay? And that's going to save the most recent information as far as the last backup you've done. So again, it is a huge safeguard to ensure that your file and your data is safe. Okay. Number 3, okay, when you open your working data file, okay, QuickBooks displays the blank, okay, which is going to be a screen that is broken into 5 sections, okay, each dealing with a separate functional area of a business, okay? What do we call that? We talked about this, right? It's called the home page, right? The home page is a graphic depiction of the flow of a transaction in QuickBooks. And I've mentioned before, right? It's broken into up to 5 sections, right? Your vendors, your customers, your employees, your banking, and your company, right? Dealing with specific parts and areas of an actual business. Number 4, blank are used in QuickBooks sales forms, okay? And they also represent what the company buys and sells. So we mentioned this too, right? We call these items, right? Items is in regards to anything that is in regards to the sales process, right? So it could be the list of items that you purchase, the items that you sell. And we'll talk more in depth about items in chapter 8. Okay. Last but not least, question 5. A list of which shows all accounts in your working data file is called the blank. All right. And this file or this list, right, represents all the transactions that you can do in a business. And we call that the chart of accounts. Okay. All right. So that concludes today's lecture in regards to chapter 1, Introduction to QuickBooks. So other than that, stay tuned for other lessons and other videos in regards to the remaining chapters in the book.